Welcome back to the Automate Construction Podcast. I'm here with Justin, CEO of Printera, for maybe the fourth or fifth time I've been here at your factory.
Yeah, I think it's about that, and thanks, Jared, for coming by.
My pleasure, but it's the first podcast episode we're doing, so let's try to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
When did you discover 3D printed concrete?
So, let's see, I think it goes back to late 2020. I saw an article on Reddit.
Cool.
And it was, some company that was 3D printing a house, and it intrigued me enough to start to get interested in that. I've always been a 3D printing enthusiast, just from like plastic hobbyist knickknacks and stuff. But the idea of 3D printing a structure was like so out there to me that I was like, all right, I got to learn more. And my journey down that road actually then started with printed farms, because I'm in South Florida. I saw they were doing a project in South Florida. At the time, it was their tractor shed.
Yeah.
And I reached out to them in that project, and they said, hey, we're going to be wrapped up on that, but we're going to do a foundation coming up, and if you want to come and observe, you're welcome to. And it was that kind of accommodating spirit that really catalyzed me into starting my own company, because I took a vacation day and I went and I observed, and I guess probably a lot like yourself, right? When you see it, it's like, yeah, I became a believer very quickly, right? I was like, this is going to change construction. How can I get involved? I'm not a general contractor, but I've got the 3D printing background. I've always been very handy. I've done a lot of projects myself, from electrical to plumbing to just kind of finishing work. And so I left that day on the print site saying, I got to get into this. I got to maybe do it at a reduced footprint, focus on the stuff that isn't permitted. Your furnishings, your kind of architectural features and accents. And I kind of started down that road. And here we are, I guess 4 years later, and it's been a pretty cool journey.
Yeah, I was going to say, imagine if you could show that version of Justin looking at the very first printed tractor shed, where you are today with all the, right now you've got your printer operating behind us. You decided to go with the vertical printer.
Yeah.
I guess let's rewind a little bit further back. So, did you go to college?
Yeah, so I went to Bentley University in Boston. I have a bachelor's in business management and entrepreneurship. I've always known I wanted to start my own thing. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. Out of college, I went to work for a Fortune 50 company, United Technologies, and I was just a cog in the wheel there, right? Like just one of 100,000 employees, and it felt very rigid, but the bonus there was that it brought me to Florida. So
sure, cool.
I was in Connecticut. They did a full corporate reload down here, and then I started doing things for different companies. I worked in an IT consultancy role for Royal Caribbean, HSBC, Slim Fast Brands. So I got a lot of project exposure and like managing big projects and teams.
Yeah. Big companies too.
Big companies, yeah. So good for like resume building, brand name recognition. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, and I've got great connections there even today. So. You mentioned Vertigo. So after I left the print site, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to try and get involved. I bought a 3D potter machine, which is for sale in Giselle Bots. But it was enough to get me going in the garage. And I was running that, and I was bumping into all the struggles that really early print folks have. And your video with Volker, the first time you did an interview in person in his facility, I just recognized kind of the character of Volker, and I sent them a message, and I was like, hey, I just want you to know that I really appreciate your openness and candor, and I'm new to the market and I'm learning, and I'm learning from the interview that you did. And he was super cool, and he got back to me and he's like, yeah, he's like, you might want to consider this and that, and I was sending him pictures of my setup, and he was like, oh, consider pushing the material down with a stick, just like super basic stuff like that, right? And after a while, I felt like I had enough of a product to take it from a garage hobby to scaling it into a real business. And when I raised the funds necessary to do it, the Vertigo system was top of mind. And it wasn't just because Volker's a good guy. It was their system, to me, was one of the best systems out there. And it remains so today, in my opinion. I looked at a lot of stuff. When I started, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I looked at everything from mudbots to I looked at a Cobod system, I looked at Seabay, I looked at X-Tree, right? And ultimately, this is what made sense. And Volker as a guy also made sense. And it just kind of came together that way. So.
Did you have the vision of printing in a facility the entire time?
Yes. I
Cool.
knew I didn't want to be on a construction site. I knew that the kind of stuff that I wanted to be doing was going to be more portable, so it just made more sense. I had no intention of doing structures. So if we talk about kind of the journey of, going from the garage into raising the funds and then being in this facility, I'll actually give you a little nod to timing. So that whole time I was doing this on a moonlighting basis, right? I was still running my consultancy, working with those big companies, and I purchased a machine, and it was a 6-month lead time at the time, and we came down to the delivery date. It was in November of 22, and Volker came with, and because we built a relationship and he wanted to spend the time to get to know me, and he stayed at my house. And I remember one night after an installation day, we were just kind of sitting around the dinner table, and he goes, Justin, he's like, you just bought a considerably expensive piece of equipment. You can't do this on the nights and weekends anymore. Like, you got to make the jump, right? And I'm thinking, yeah, I definitely planned to do that, but I was scared of the insurance situation, right? Like, I've got 2 kids and a wife, and I'm the sole income source, and it's a relatively new technology. 3D printing in construction in general, right, was new, and the smaller footprint of the kind of stuff that we were targeting was even more unheard of. Like, Picus is the only other company doing it, and at the time that I jumped into it here, right? And so I was nervous, but the timing was that he left, the machine installation was complete on a Wednesday, and I got laid off from my job on Friday as part of an 80% rolling reduction.
That's even better than quitting.
Sector. Exactly. So I got a severance package, I got continuation of benefits, and I was like, it wasn't my own timing, but I'm making it happen, right? Like, that was being pushed, right? That's walking up to the edge and saying, I'm going to do something, and someone had another plan for me, and they gave me the push. So
fate worked out.
It worked out. Yeah.
It's cool how history unfolds. You see the podcast with Volker. Now we're on the podcast now. Maybe somebody watches this podcast, becomes your customer in the future, and then I do a podcast with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. So before we get too deep into it, one of the big things you're excited about working on right now is a Startengine campaign, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking a more, what I believe to be a more measured growth approach, right? So we are generating revenue, we've got product on the market, and now we're at kind of this crux in time where this year is going to see a big increase on our demand and our volume of output. We've got 3 housing projects, we've got some infrastructure stuff that we're sitting in the midst of. So we're saying, I think the timing is right to bring on some capital. And we graduated from the FAU Tech Runway Accelerator program, and we did a pitch to a bunch of VC companies, and I had experience with previous jobs in the VC companies. They're the ones that did the big 80% layoff.
Vultures.
Exactly, and I was looking, I was like, you know what, is there a way that we can take this to the next level without bringing a real VC company on board? And at the end of the day as well, I look at this technology, especially with the way that we're doing structures now, as something that's elevating society. And so I wanted to create a fundraising mechanism that was more than just the individual VC firm. It could be the individual person that said, hey, I like this technology, maybe one day I want a 3D printed house. They can own a little piece of the company. And Startengine approached me, and they're like, hey, here's a vehicle for that. And it just made sense. So
cool.
We've got about a month left of that. Anybody who's listening and wants to participate in Startengine, I mean, you can jump in. It's startengine.com/Printera, or you can search us in the search bar. And we're happy to have your participation. I mean, it comes in a direct line to me. We're an open company. Like, I have a calendar availability. Anyone who invests, or anyone in general, can book 30 minutes of my schedule, and we'll talk about the business, and we'll talk about, what our niche in the market is and why we think we're in a better position doing structures this way than maybe some of the guys that are doing the site.
Where are they able to book you on your schedule?
So I can share a link to my calendar for the video. It's like a Calendly style thing, so they can just kind of jump in that way.
That's a generous offer.
Yeah, but I mean it. Like, I like talking to the technology. I like spreading the word of what we're doing here, and it was only through Printed Farms' outwardness and Volker's outwardness that I'm in the position I'm in today. And I believe that a rising tide lifts all ships in this industry. It's a massive industry. There's a massive market cap, and I'm not scared of competition, right? I want to foster an environment where more people know about this, right?
Certainly at this stage.
Abundance of work. Yeah.
So you're doing the fundraise, and when you get the money, you're planning on getting another printer soon?
Yep. So we already are in discussions with Vertigo about a second machine. We're in discussions with our neighbor who isn't renewing their lease, so we're going to take over some additional space. So the growth trajectory for us is, we want to maximize our footprint here in Florida. We want to show what you can do from a pre-printed model and how you can facilitate this market. And then ultimately the goal is to expand to satellite print locations in other states. So we want to bring the print center close to the demand, but it doesn't need to be on the site, right? Like if you look at the quality of the extrusion, that's not an accident. That's because we're controlling the environment, we're controlling the set of the material, right? We're monitoring all those metrics, and it would be very difficult to do in the field. So,
yeah, it's tricky in Florida with the humidity. It's hard to keep your material on the shelf for a very long time, but you have the high humidity, which I guess improves your print quality to some degree.
Yep, and we try to compartmentalize it. So we now have this system where we're dropping a greenhouse over our prints at the end of the day. We're misting into it, so you keep the humidity around 95% in there. Relative to the air-conditioned humidity at the warehouse, right? Like we're sitting at 40 to 50%. So it's a big difference in the longevity of our product in the field, but also the raw material. We haven't had any go bad on this yet. So.
Good, yeah. That means you're running through it a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I understand it's only like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or you get longer than that.
We get 6 months shelf life out of it in a controlled environment like this. So.
But the garage door is wide open, so it's not that controlled.
Today it is, yeah. So we'll look at what the humidity is outside. We saw there was a little rain in the forecast, so we opened the door up, let the humidity in. But like the majority of the time, if we're printing, right, during the print, we want the humidity high. The other 12 hours of the day, air conditioning's running, and it's the prints are in their cure chamber. So
sounds like a high electric bill.
It's not too bad.
That's good. So you've got the 2 walls printing behind us, and then the third, what's the third object?
The sill for under the windows. So
yes.
It's still a wall module, it's just a short one that, we'll see how those pieces go together to form the first piece of that structure.
You've been able to form a lot of partnerships with bigger companies, maybe a testament to the companies you worked at before. What was the first big company you worked with?
So at Printera, we had a very early coordination with Sika. We had a very early coordination with Quikrete, helping them domesticate their print line. So the Sika story is actually really interesting because at the time they didn't have any U.S. domestic product when I started up, when I was in the garage. And they actually saw what I was doing with the small Scara. And they said, hey, we've got this material, it's coming out of Dubai. They invested in that market early because Dubai set that objective that they want the 25% of single family 3D printed by 2030, right? So
Clock's ticking.
Clock's ticking, it is. But Sika made the investment in that market, right? So they had a mature material. And when they reached out to me, it was under the guise of, hey, we want to domesticate this to the US, and we want your experience on the Dubai material and then your experience on the US material, and give them feedback and notes. And so we did that. And that was actually one of the big catalysts of me starting Printera, because when I was in the garage by myself, working with Home Depot product, I couldn't get much taller than 1.5 feet, 2 feet without collapse. And then Sika enters the picture, and their stuff just worked like magic. So, I said, I'm not a material scientist. I don't want to be in the material business. I want to be in the print business. And Sika was willing to take the ball and run with us for a while. Ultimately, the reason that bond isn't tighter today is just because it took them longer to enter the market with a material that I could reliably purchase. Right? I had a business to run in the meantime. We're still open to discussions and using the materials.
So you haven't done any exclusive deals with any material companies?
We're not exclusive to anybody.
Cool.
Yeah. There is a possibility that it's shaping up that way with us with this big unveiling we did a roll of concrete with Sackrete and Oldcastle. They're taking the market very seriously. They're investing the resources in developing the mix. And I could see us going in that direction. So it's we're going to have to see how things play out. But this is the year. So
whatever's the right decision, of course. So how did you build a relationship with Sackrete?
So that was actually a relationship that came out of Quikrete. So a gentleman that worked there moved over to Sackrete, or Oldcastle technically, and he's known about us, and he saw the kind of quality that we were putting out. So when they determined that they wanted to start looking into 3D printing, he was kind of the voice on their side that said, hey, you should really look at what was Printed Patio at the time and work with them, right? And they did their diligence, and they talked to a couple different companies, and ultimately they gave us a contract to work with them on material testing. So, yeah.
So you founded the company as Printed Patio, and how did it evolve from there?
So my background in Rhino and Grasshopper was all self-taught. So it was good for the Printed Patio line of business, right? Where I could make a planner, I could make some stuff that looks pretty in that regard. But
working with Vertigo, they have such great experience with that. I'm sure they helped you along the way.
yeah, so they gave us a base slicer, which is what I was using. There's an abundance of YouTube tutorials and things. You can learn Grasshopper if you've got a mathematical mindset, which I don't have to the level that my partners now have, but enough that I could get around. And after having the machine for a little while, the other Justin, who's now a co-founder of Printera, found me because he heard I had the machine that he wanted exposure to, and he's like, hey, I really want to see how this machine works. Can I help you out with any projects? And the timing was right. I was actually working with Jim on the big column project for the Dixon Stables. I said, yeah, I could use a hand, right? And he came out and he helped slice, and he was extremely proficient running the machine right away. And at the time, his company was Cineform Design. And after working together for 6 months, I was like, hey, you want to come on board? And he's like, yeah, but I want to do houses, right? And I said, well, I never anticipated doing them, but I believe in your background. You've got the architecture, and he's got the experience of printing up in Tallahassee and printing the Dixon Stable. So yeah, let's do it, And at that time, Printed Patio as a brand didn't make sense anymore. And the reality of what we were seeing even as Printed Patio was, there was more demand in architectural features and columns and kind of larger elements. We were getting some aquatic interest, so I was like, yeah, Printed Patio is a brand. Maybe it's a product line, but it's not a brand. So we did this whole market evaluation, and we did Printera. It was trademarkable, and we could get the domain for Printera 3D, so we did.
Yeah, cool. So the company you started after you left your old job, how long were you in the garage, or did you immediately get the warehouse?
So I was in the garage for almost a year. So I started February 2021 in the garage with the Stara, and it was November of 22 by the time the Vertigo landed here in Florida in our facility. So, you've got almost 2 years, but a year of that was really the R&D and building the confidence to say that I've got a product. And then it was 6 months of fundraising to achieve the capital that I needed to stand up this facility. We did a pretty humble raise. We only raised $410K. So, we're keeping it very streamlined and minimal.
Was that friends and family?
Predominantly friends and family, former colleagues of mine. Like, I didn't go to the traditional markets, right? I had a lot of folks that I worked with in previous capacity, and like, hey, if you're going to do something, they believed in me and they saw the technology, and they're like, yeah, we'll put some money behind it. So,
no active investors.
No active investors, like not traditional, like not traditional angel or traditional VC groups. So, yeah, we did it on that vehicle, and it was a safe convertible note is how we raised the money, and the rest has been organic, right? So, the first year. I don't really count 22 as a production year because we got the machine in November. 23, we did 110K in revenue.
Cool.
24, we're doing around 250. I still need the final numbers to come in through accounting. This year, I'm projecting 550, 600.
That's great growth.
If I keep doubling every year is kind of the goal. And now,
you'll own the world.
Exactly. I mean, and all it takes is one big project, right? Like I talked a little bit about in the video about Minneapolis as a catalyst for building tiny homes, and they've got this pilot project that's in the final phase of permitting. We're literally just waiting for that final permit to come back to get rocking and rolling. But that's the first house of a 56 house project that they have lined up.
Wow.
And if that one all comes together the way that they're imagining it to, then my growth could be explosive after that. I just don't know. I'm a very conservative business person, right? I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch, so to speak, right?
Do you think they require a cost advantage to continue with the other 52 homes from that one?
No, because they've gone all in on the marketing of 3D printed homes.
Cool.
So it's actually their catalyst is saying, hey, we're 3D printing houses, and they've seen interest in that. The other reality, right, is that we're in a very difficult market in Florida in terms of the entry point, cost point for housing. And nationally, you know, if you set aside the overall home shortage, there's a more specific shortage in starter homes, right? Like people in your generation and my generation that are looking at like, what's my entryway to ownership, right? And I'm actually curious for your opinion on it, but like, would you like a tiny home? Like, I feel like it could be a good stepping point into something, like, because you could get the benefit of ownership, right? Like, if Minneapolis sells this house at $220K, that means with reasonable credit, your mortgage payment's probably $1,200 a month, right? If that becomes a reality, that could be similar or less than what you're paying in rent, I'm assuming.
If insurance is not, that's pretty much exactly what I pay in rent, but if insurance isn't $1,000 a month, then
Right.
it makes sense.
Right, because then you have equity out of it, right? Like, you know, if you're looking at a starter home as a 10-year investment, right, you have, you know, projecting the average American family, right, like maybe they want to have a kid, right, so you have a 2-bedroom in a little tiny home, you know, the kid can grow into something, and then you scale in the future, right, but you could walk out of that 10 years down the road with a substantial amount of equity, and hopefully the housing value increases. I think it's a cool way of getting there. So that's kind of Minneapolis' take. So, you know, I think he made the commitment that he'll open up on his end around like what his overall costs are, because I know you've been looking for that for a while as well. And I can tell you today, right, like, you know, the wall components of that, tiny home and garage, is on our side is $33,000, right? That includes our profit margin. So, we're also in a really weird time, right? Like, Canada now has a 25% tariff effective, I guess it's today.
We'll see if that lasts.
We'll see, right? But if it's legit, suddenly lumber's 25% more expensive, and we were never competing against lumber, but
Yeah, I don't
gets
think
us so closer at least.
They didn't do that because they want to tax Canada 25%. It's just a bargaining chip.
Right, it's a bargaining chip. I agree. But
Hopefully one that's gone by Friday.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, we saw what happened with the jet out of Cuba, right? Not Cuba, Colombia.
They made an agreement with Mexico already to extend it back a month. Mexico will send 10,000 agents to the border, and they'll get one more month of no tariffs.
Okay, yeah, cool. So, we're in such kind of a weird economic position now, right? Like, no one really knows what's going to happen, but like I'm laser focused on, regardless of administration, regardless of what the housing need is, I feel like there's an opportunity here with what we're doing and the way we're doing it.
Especially if immigration is going to be lower, concrete labor is made up a lot of immigrants, and it's going to be impossible to source labor. So this technology is just getting more and more important as we kind of both saw it coming.
Yeah, and you think about the assembly of our modules, right? It's, you know, in the tiny home, I think we counted it's like 22 pieces that come together to make up the house. And flip that against block, right? I mean, you've probably got 6,000 blocks, right? So it's it should be easier because you're telehandling it. It's not as labor intensive, but it's also not as burdensome to the laborer doing the work because it's equipment based, right? You're positioning stuff and kind of moving it into shape, but you're not lifting and placing.
It's easy to picture it that way. We'll need to audit that. But
Yeah,
I
totally.
think that's
Absolutely.
the vision. Like, that's what I dedicated my YouTube channel to seeing someday. So.
Yeah.
Like, Elon Musk says he's going to Mars. He doesn't get to Mars today. He doesn't, it's just one step at a time in the right direction. That's what makes it so fun to watch and so cool to see. It's fun to be part of the journey, and it's cool that people can now be a part of your journey too. Crowdfunding is great because it's like, they're not just investors. You get like a whole army of people who are now invested in your success. They're watching social media. They're in it.
Yeah, and there's comments. I get emails from people investing, right? You build like a customer presence, right? So like, I like to think that the people that have invested don't just set it and forget it. Like, I like to think that now they're kind of like champions of Printera out in the market, right? Telling people they know, like, hey, I'm in this cool 3D printing company, and maybe they want to 3D print a house, or maybe they want to just do an outdoor kitchen, right? Like, we can do it for them. So.
Even if they don't have the money to invest, they see a video, they're still telling their friends about it, and they're still excited about it. Maybe they want to do it themselves, or whatever the situation is, they could reach out to you and get, whether they want to print themselves and print with you, get your help with designs. Yeah. It's a lot of, what do you think as will the business be mostly you printing, you supporting other people printing, you designing things for people?
So it depends on my expansion plan for the satellites. So in the background here, we've already got some guys that are looking at standing up a Printera operation in Louisville. And the way that that'll look is, they have their own vision for what they want to print. They're already in the tiny home business. So they want to print houses, but they're seeing the stuff that we're doing here. And we're going to be supporting them with designs, right? Like our catalog of designs will be open to them. We can license them to other printers if they're interested that aren't under the Printera umbrella. We can help with G-code, right? We can help. We built the slicer ourselves. We looked at the one that Vertigo had, and we wanted to do a couple different things with it. So Justin's got the background in that, so we kind of ended up building our own at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, we're here and available to assist.
Have you guys been getting patents?
So we have one process patent that has been submitted a little over a year and change ago. The backlog right now is 2 years out, so we're kind of just waiting to see what happens with it. But it's for a post process that we're actually going to be using an inkjet to apply high fidelity imagery to a printed substrate. And I don't have an example here, but when we did the pilot, we printed the Mandalorian on a wall.
Cool.
And then we printed a Joker. And the inkjet, because it doesn't make contact with the surface, it's able to fill the nooks and crannies. And so the technology is really complementary to what we have here. And it'll be robotically arm mounted, so you can move around a non-planar object and have that kind of high fidelity imagery. So
cool.
That's the one we've got active at the moment. Otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that's trade secret. Like we have this shroud over the print head today because we have what is in effect a 2K print system, but we're not injecting accelerant. We're doing something different. So I don't foresee necessarily wanting to patent that, because when you throw a patent out there, sure, you have some protection, but you're also saying, hey, here's what we did, right? So there's a little bit of trade secret going on. I find that it's an interesting balance, right? Because like on one hand, I want to be an open book, and Volker helped me, but he didn't fully extend like his
Sure.
IP, right? And I want to help people. I don't want to fully reveal our IP, but
it's a business at the end of the day. You deserve to make money for taking a lot of risk, dedicating your life to it. It's an awesome thing.
Yeah, and it's been fun, right? I mean, I'm making significantly less as an individual now than I was making 4 years ago. But
Building equity.
I'm having more fun every day, right? My destiny is my own. We're doing awesome projects that are going to be around long after I'm not here anymore. Ideally, long after my kid and my kid's kids aren't here anymore. And I think that's cool to make a mark on the world like that.
So you had to learn a bunch of new stuff to get where you are today. Was it mostly software, mechatronics, materials?
I learned more about concrete in the last couple of years than I ever thought I would know in my entire life.
Mortar,
Portland cement.
I always say
admixtures.
concrete.
Yeah, I know. The reality is I'm learning sales, business development, right? That today I wear that hat predominantly. We've got some commission-based sales folks in the field, but 99% of the business is coming through me. The back end, the accounting, the bookkeeping. I had to learn the programming of the robot, although only to a level that I could hand it off to Justin. Now he's the expert in that. So yeah, I mean, it's it is truly the startup. They say everyone wears all hats, and it's true, right? I mean, what you can bring without the knowledge is you can bring the work ethic. You can bring a customer-focused attitude that that you want to be collaborative and forthright and open with your customers. A philosophy in terms of how you're doing business, but everything else you learn along the way. So,
what makes a good customer for you today?
Today, it's it's funny. I still classify our early customers as risk takers, right? Like they're the people that are looking at a new technology the same way I did, and saying I want to involve it in my project, even though it's something that they may not have experienced themselves with, or even know other contractors that have the experience. I view them as collaborative and trailblazers, people who recognize that this is something new that can help them realize maybe a creative thought that otherwise is cost prohibitive. Housing gets a lot of the attention in the market today, but if we look at the project that we did in New York, that actually had a real world cost advantage today, because we sold that project It's $130,000 project for us. The general contractor that was in charge of the installation, he did all the installation, he did the finish, the microcrete topping to make it smooth. He spent more on that than he spent on buying the object from us. And at the end of the day, the building owner was telling us it was still a cost advantage going that route versus bringing a concrete truck into New York City, pump truck into the middle of a building in that dense environment. Another element that we have there is up on the 25th floor. We designed it so that the modules could be fit in the freight elevator, right? Each of the pieces could go up that way, get it dry assembled, and then, coated finished, as opposed to having to crane something in. So there are some cases already to be had where it's a real cost advantage. And I know you just saw some with Picus, right, in the stadium.
It's hard to believe there's a cost advantage, especially at $180,000. But in New York City, it's so expensive. Like a friend of mine got a quote for their bathroom tile. It was $5,000 to replace like a 36 square foot bathroom tile.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do comps, especially something that's a one-off project. But it is a one-off, so those structures, the shapes and designs are never going to be printed again. So if you make form work for that, one-time use form work.
Yeah. And I think that's the lowest hanging fruit today, right? Because if you want to do this big intricate thing, and you're going to otherwise pay to have all that form work done and the specialized crew, we say today when people ask us about housing, right? Like how does it compare? And I said, well, right now it's more expensive, is what I tell everyone, unless you want a curve, right? It's very expensive to curve block. So if your house already is planning to do maybe a bay window or a sweeping back wall, right? Now we're competitive, but the straight wall basis, we have some work to go to get there, but there is opportunity in the market. The columns that we did for Dixon Stables, or even the columns that are behind you over there, the columns are running, $1,200, $1,500, solid concrete piece, right? It's more expensive than a sonotube, but
how many of them can you get out of one super sack?
So the columns that are back there, they're 8 feet tall, and they ran, I think, 12 to the sack is what we were looking at, and our material prices, right? So, that European material was coming in at like $1,200 a sack. So one column pays the sack, the rest is the overhead. Mm-hmm. So it's good margin. And on their end, at Dixon Stables is a really cool example of it because Jim called me and he's like, hey, I need these columns. Can you do them in 2 weeks? And I'm like, you're talking a custom element. And there were multiple sizes in that project, by the way. I don't know if you, I know you've walked around it a bunch of times, but they weren't all the same. So his comparison against going to a precaster and saying, I want a 14-inch square that terminates in a 10-inch circle, and I want them in 3 different sizes. We were able to print the order and get it to him in 2 weeks, and he filled it and he saw it went well. So
this print's going pretty well now too. You want to talk about the first one?
Yeah, we can talk about
So what happened there?
So we had
first of all, it was going, and it went amazing. You have a great layer quality that you achieved on that.
Yeah.
Really consistent, and the other side has an amazing diamond parametric design. Yeah. So it's one of the situations where formwork, I don't even know how somebody would try to make formwork for that. Maybe you'd 3D print the formwork in plastic or something, I don't know.
Yeah, that would be a really interesting thing to see, is how somebody would, maybe I've seen some stucco artists, right, where they'll do the flat wall and then maybe they'll handcraft those diamond peaks. But yeah, it's a great use case. We have what we like to call our demo curse here, mm-hmm. right? So like it's almost like every time someone's in with a camera or we have a group of people, something goes wrong.
Is that Murphy's Law or the engineering law or something?
Yeah, it's like Murphy's. Yeah, it could be Murphy's Law. And for us today, it was 3.5 feet into the print. The pump has a water flow sensor that's just telling it, hey, you're getting flow. And for whatever reason, when that pump pulls any error, it also stops pumping, mm-hmm. even though it doesn't need to stop pumping. It's just something it chooses to do.
Safety.
And maybe it's a safety thing, but in that scenario, it stopped pumping. And it dropped a couple, remnants of what was in the pipe, and then you just had no material coming out. So Justin was able to scoop those off, count how many layers up we were from the start location, re-slice the file, we're talking within 5 minutes here, and he came back and we picked up from where we left off, and it was on an interior support where we resumed the print, so you would never know that something happened.
Yeah, that's great. 5 minutes, you got to be really fast because the material's setting, right?
Yep, yep. Fortunately, in the majority of our print, running a 2K print operation, we're encouraging the activation to happen at the last moment, so we're not so worried about the pipe. We've had print failures happen here where we'll let the pipe sit for 20, 25 minutes and we're not sweating it. We also tried printing in CSA at one point, right? And that's known for being extremely fast setting, and we've lost hoses. So we know how it goes on both sides. Justin printed the project up in Tallahassee, right? On the field, when something goes wrong, it's kind of a moment of chaos, right? People run in. That's where you really see how well oiled your team is.
The printer's the fun part, but the printers are pretty much all like reliable in that they go to where they're supposed to in very precise coordinates. It's the mixer and the material where it seems like a lot of the challenges are, and we don't have to name names, but there was one material you printed, it looked beautiful, super consistent layers, and then when you lifted it up, you said you could lift each layer up like it was not even intact.
Yeah, and that was that company, and I won't throw them under the bus with name and name, but that company came out and they tested the mix, right? And you talk about how important the mix is. They were within one super sack testing core samples, right? So they stick a rod into the bag, right? And they pull it out and they do a sift test to see what percentage of each material they have. And within the same sack, the recipe was varying by up to 7 percentage
so it wasn't
points
homogeneous.
difference. Exactly. That's exactly. So it wasn't blended well. And the first time that we encountered that, we didn't even get to start printing. It actually, a very low percent of Portland, high percent of sand went into the pump, and it was like trying to pump pure sand. The pump just wouldn't pump. So yeah, we've learned a lot of, kind of what's happening here and there, right? Troubleshooting things, and you're right. It's the pump, the material are the two most paramount elements. The robot's important, right? That it goes where you want it to go, but most of the time they do. So, yeah.
This is a cool one that has the great heads-up display from Vertigo and also that ABB grease injection system, so it's automatically replenishing the lubricant.
It makes for a very relaxed print.
One person operating.
One person operating, and even now, and if you've been seeing the bit in the background, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be on the control the whole time.
He's very tuned into the sounds. When I turned the drone on, he was like, warn me before new sounds come, because I guess he's like one with the printer, and that if something goes wrong, even though I wouldn't have any idea, he can tell exactly what it is, like a car mechanic.
You hear that like ever so slightly high-pitched whine, right? Like I know that's the sound of the rotor stator, right? So if that cuts out, that's our first indication, right? Like something's not going on, something's not right. Or the interval between how often that thing kicks on, right? We know it's every 3 to 5 minutes, depending on how fast we're printing. And if you don't hear it, then we know, okay, that's probably a bad sign. We're near the end of a silo or something. So
another material you were using early on, one time I visited, it was different sack to sack. So you said like half the mix was not good.
Yeah, that was that same, the same culprit that I'm talking about. Even inner sack that was off, it had a greater variation from sack to sack.
But they were good about it, and they took it back, replaced it.
They took it back, replaced it. Exactly. That's why, at the end of the day, right, I don't believe it, at least at this point in the industry, I don't think anyone's out with nefarious intention, right? Like everybody wants to drive the industry forward. Mistakes happen, right? And to me, it's about how do you rectify the mistake, right? In that scenario, where we left off with them, I sent them data of here's what's happening, here's where the failure is in the field for our customer, and we're rectifying it on our end. And I haven't expressed any demand out of them. I just want to see what they do, right? Whether they offer to do the right thing or not, right? And that's why I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but we'll see.
They recognize it's a new industry, and they're investing in the future.
Yeah.
So was 3D printed construction the first new technology you got interested in? You mentioned you had some 3D printers.
Yeah, and that was just like tinkering. My background being in IT, like I've done some app development. Like I had a couple smaller startups in other industries that ultimately never went anywhere. Like this is the most lived in, furthest along company that I've.
Were they apps?
One was a mobile app. The other one was a web interface app.
What companies? What did they do?
So the most previous before this was called In Order, and it was a food delivery application, but it was specifically targeting catering. So like pharmaceutical reps and salespeople that have to buy lunches for offices in order to facilitate the meetings.
Good market.
They hate doing it, right? So the idea was to build that. But that's a marketplace, right? You got the chicken and the egg scenario. It's hard to get out in that. And then before that was in college for me. I was really into paintballing, and so I built a sale marketplace. It was like eBay, but only for paintball, right?
Cool.
It's a big used equipment market, and I even got my first exposure to manufacturing because I recognized the chicken and the egg scenario there, right? Where I needed users to have demand, but I needed sellers to have users. And so I actually got into manufacturing out of China some of the smaller elements that you use on the field, like cleaning equipment and like pods and stuff, so to populate my own site. And I ran with that for like a year, and ultimately it just wasn't worth the effort. So.
What year was the paintball business?
Paintball business was, let's see, class. So I was Bentley class of 2013. So I closed it in line with graduation because it was really a dorm room initiative. Thinking back on it, I actually took some crypto payments back in time. And
nice.
One of those things in retrospect that I wish I would have held on to.
Could have been millions.
I know, right? I could have bankrolled my own expansion here. Yeah. But,
or retired on an island or something. But the next one was the catering app, and what year was that?
So that was 2017, 2018.
So around Uber Eats and that kind of stuff.
They were already establishing a market. That was kind of the catalyst for me, saying, I could use that model because there were a lot of imitations. It's cheap to imitate those apps. And then on the other end, the restaurants, somewhere along COVID, I think they all gave in and kind of agreed. But if you remember when those services rolled out, there was a lot of
expensive 30%
exactly.
fees.
Restaurants didn't want to bear the expensive price of that, right? And when it started, they weren't passing those on to the consumer, right? They were just kind of bearing that cost. And
they only have 30% margins to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. The catering was appealing to them because they have higher margins on that. It's an easier thing for them to book. And the sales reps, they didn't want anything to do with, having to coordinate an order for an office, right? So it was a good idea. It just never, it never really got there.
Yeah, but there's always you got to try 10 times to get the one.
Yeah.
And now you've had a couple of those tries rolled into 3D printed construction, so you're getting close to the home runs.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. This might be it.
What do you need the most to grow?
So today it's sales, right? So we need to fill our capacity. The big projects that we have, right? The challenge with those are you have a very long business development cycle. So whether it's the house, right? House is actually not that bad because you can interface with an end customer and they could say, I want to do a house. They acquire the property and it can be 6 to 8 months of pre-con before you break ground. The New York project was 2 years in the making.
Wow.
So those projects, a lot of funds at once. It consumes a lot of capacity to get it out the door. And then you've got this lull between. So for us, we're trying to build the book of business that we don't have the lulls, right? We're trying to soften the peaks and valleys. And, some of that's building relations, some of it's participating in trade shows. So we're out there selling in those vehicles, and ultimately I want to have a good sales base of someone who, maybe has more formal training in that than I do, because I've been nurturing all that myself. So, if you're interested in a job at Printera and you're in sales, come talk to me.
Yeah, what's that thing?
The wall back there? So that was the first wall module of the Olympia project. It's still on our website.
It's like 10 feet tall with a curvature of 9 feet or something.
Exactly, and so that house was designed by the other Justin. It was the Nautilus shell in plan. So if you look at it, plan down, it's the Fibonacci sequence, and then we also had the curve and elevation. So it would have been a phenomenally hurricane-resistant structure, right? The way that wind load moves around it. The end client for that was out of Washington State, so we were very ambitious when he came into Printera and was like, hey, I got this project, we're going to send it across the country. And ultimately, we had a falling out with the architect on that, and they took it. And I wasn't too heartbroken about it because I was nervous about sending wall modules from Florida to California.
Took it
Or
for
Seattle,
what?
honestly.
It's not being built yet, is it?
So they're saying that they're building it. I haven't had an update on it. And,
I've heard that a lot of times.
Yeah, I hope it happens for the guy, because at the end of the day, the client is the one that, you know, it matters the most, that he gets the house he wants to live in. And on our end, because we designed it, you know, I would still like to see it fulfilled. And if nothing more, maybe we'll do it in Florida.
Yeah.
The design's still pretty cool.
We've got this table in front of us, and that's not the color the material extrudes out, right?
Yep. So we've got a couple processes happening now. So today, to be quick to market and be able to offer a full color spectrum, we have a post process where we're spraying.
Mm-hmm.
It's a concrete stain, so you can still kind of see some of the character of the concrete through it, but it only bleeds through a very small amount. So if it gets nicked or chipped, if it's anything more than just like a quick surface scuff, you'll see the raw concrete under it. We're also piloting direct pigment injection. So we've got some pieces over there where we've done that. It's not reliable enough yet where I can offer it as a solution where, you know, I know every single time it's going to be what the customer wants, but we're investing in developing that.
It also seems kind of like a waste of dye. It only shows on the outside.
Yeah. When it's homogeneous, it carries some good UV resistance properties, which is nice. It cuts the labor aspect out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have to do an extra process. But this isn't too bad. I mean, you know, we've gotten the spray down pretty well. This trunk was actually designed as a column. We want to do the first 2 feet to see how it looks. But the city of Fort Myers was doing 4 park pavilions that they wanted the basis of the pavilions to look like palm tree trunks.
Cool.
So that was what this was designed for.
Yeah, I see that. It looks a little bit like a palm tree.
Yeah.
What other automations can you add to your process?
So I'm excited about the prospect of some AI adjustments in the monitoring system that we have. So right now, you know, we're looking at 17 metrics, right? From everything from ambient humidity to pump pressure to nozzle temperature, nozzle, you know, chamber pressures. And what we know is as we see those oscillations happen, you know, with pump pressure is a perfect example, right? Typically, if your pump pressure builds, it means your material is drying out. So we'll make a manual adjustment on our end to increase the water a little bit and bring that peak down. That's a prime example of where we can automate the monitoring of, you know, what that real-time feed is, and then if we need to, it can feed back to the printer to adjust the water on its own. And that takes that off of the plate of the operator.
Do you have water temperature control?
We have water temperature control, not out of an industrial chiller, like to the, like, you know, the degree accuracy, but we have enough to the point where if we're working with an aggressive material, we need refrigeration, we've got refrigeration, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you had many municipal visitors?
Yes. And we're getting more and more interest out of that. So we just sent 2 planters up to Cape Canaveral, right, the Space Coast. And what we hope to be doing for them soon is the new concession stand behind their municipal ball field. And that's another thing where they're capitalizing on our fidelity, because the whole back wall of that project is actually a shuttle launching,
cool.
like as like a, you know, kind of an image in the print, and then it'll have some stars and things. So yeah, they were excited about it. We presented to them. Local governments come in. We've had county commissioners. We've had I've had local boards. Hopefully soon we're going to have Senator. Well, I guess not Senator Rubio anymore. He's now, you know, he's now at the executive branch. But Congressman Mast, he's also going to come out. So yeah, I mean, there's been interest in the government about it.
Let's talk more about the merger acquisition.
Yeah. So that was Cineform Design. So as I mentioned, Justin Scheinberg and Alex Cadena, they were running Cineform Design. They were exclusively a design firm around architecture for 3D printing, and then also operations. So Printed Farms employed them for a while to help them with slicing the design, but then also on site and executing and operating the printer. And you know, when they had the exposure to the Mind Machine, we were working together for about 6 months before I recognized their value. And I was like, hey guys, like, you want to you want to turn this into a more permanent thing and come on board, and we'll call you co-founders and Printera, right? We'll kind of defunct Printed Patio. Centerform as an entity will be acquired for an equity stake in this new venture that we're going to start up called Printera. So it all just kind of worked out, and it so happened to be that his name's Justin and I'm Justin, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you guys for hosting me at World of Concrete. It was fun hanging out with you guys at the Airbnb.
I love going to that. I mean, we don't go to that from a sales perspective, right? Like, to us, it's getting out there, meeting more people in the industry, right? Having some presence.
Me too.
Exactly, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. You go out and you see what people are working on, and you continue to build the relations. That also speaks into the kind of the collaborative nature of the market, right? I believe collaborative is the way to go, and so we talked to Alquist, right? We talked to Sika. Obviously, we're there with Sacrete, who sponsored our way out this year for stuff in their booth. But it's cool to see what's happening every year, right? And maybe there wasn't as much print happening this year as prior years.
About the same as last year, 3 and 3.
Oh, it's 3 and 3. Okay. 3D Potter, it was their first year out there. That's the machine that I started with, right? And they're doing amazing things on their platform. Like, they've come a long way with a 2K print head and the fidelity of what they're printing.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, you saw the bust, the lady bust that they printed.
That
was
must
on
have been 2K
system. Yep. I mean, the overhangs, like, it was impressive, right? And, yeah, they've come a long way. So.
No houses yet, though. They got to get a house up.
They're coming along, though. There's some guys. I'll do some shout outs. Right, Jack's Forge. Now they're called Gollum 3D.
Yeah.
They've printed 2 full structures with the Scara. They're on their property, so they're not permitted, right? It's not like a sale house, but it's impressive what they've been able to do with it.
The permit and the occupancy certificate are a big step.
It's huge, yeah. And on our end, right, we probably would have had a structure by now if we did it on our own, but we were waiting for this permit. I'm contemplating, taking the reins in my own hands, and what you're seeing happen back here is actually for our showcase house in Fort Pierce, and we're funding a large portion of that, right? And part of that is it's an affordable housing initiative with the city, but in turn for our contribution to the shell, we're going to get 3 or 4 months of showtime out of it.
Nice.
Right? And say, hey, this is somewhere contractors or end customers can come, experience the print, and then it'll sell to somebody. But yeah, we're excited about it.
A lot of good stuff, and it's good to hear like the revenue is growing 100% year over year. Yeah. So as long as we keep that momentum up, and maybe we'll even do better, right? $1 million a year in 2026.
I'm hoping. Let's make it. Let's say 2026, and I'm going to hope it's this year, but 2026 should be the year that at least that happens.
This year you're hoping for 550, you said?
I'm hoping for 550, but I am notoriously conservative. I like to set benchmarks that I can hit. If these 3 housing projects come through, plus the infrastructure, let me put it this way. We're in the first week of February, and the 550 that I'm setting my target on is work that we already know about today. So if it's like last year, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens for the rest of the year that could move us beyond it. I want to make sure that, especially with investors now, that if I'm putting a number out there, that it's something that I think I have a good shot of hitting. So.
It's not necessarily the Elon Musk way, but it's a powerful way to, if you hit your targets every time, your word becomes gold.
Yeah, I'm hoping to set that, but I'm hoping to have that reputation, right? Like, because at the end of the day, with this Reg CF and crowdfunding, I'm no longer just accountable to me and a couple people that helped me make this a reality, right? I'm accountable to, as of this morning, like 225 people that believe in Printera enough to make an investment, right? And I take that really seriously, and I'm grateful for their participation.
So the project in New York, the layers are not exposed?
They're not. So that project, the way it came together, so the architect that designed it is 25 Water Street. So it used to be the Chase Manhattan building. It's now going to be a hotel. It's part of a $500 million renovation.
Wow.
Which blows my mind in and of itself, right? When you talk about
$500 million
that kind of budget, and it's a renovation, not a new construction. we're one small piece. But that architect all along was calling for this shape to break up their lobby, and it's separating an access ramp from a stairwell. And
they'll talk about it. It's not exposed layers. Nobody walking by necessarily, they might not know it's Printera, unfortunately.
Right. But we're gonna advertise the heck out of it.
Good.
I'm gonna send a photographer and videographer, and we're gonna. And already it's being talked about in kind of architecture circles up there. So, it would be cool if it was an exposed layer thing, but for a first project, I'm actually kind of glad it was covered because it just looks real clean and it matches the aesthetic that the architect had in mind when he set out. And he was able to capitalize on all the benefits that 3D printing brought him. So.
Yeah, hopefully it breeds more business for you. What have we missed?
So we talked about kind of our growth to this point. I think I mentioned kind of our expansion plans. We're going to have another machine inbound here hopefully soon. We're going to be taking over our neighbor. Same machine. Potentially the new nozzle. So Vertigo is continuing to innovate, right? And they've got a new nozzle that they built in conjunction with my.
The other machine will go next door, or it might go to your customers?
It'll go here.
So then a third machine would be if you start the franchise or another location?
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. So the way that we see here, Florida, we looked at the market. We said maybe we've got enough demand here to justify 3 machines. Beyond that, it's expensive to transport concrete. It's not as expensive as a lot of people think it is. They're like, oh, you can't do a project in New York. At the end of the day, that $130,000 project, that included $6,000 of transport. So it wasn't, it's not negligible, but it's also not the end of the world for that project.
It's about where it should be to keep it working. Right.
And I'm hoping that by bringing the production closer to the demand, I mean, you can cut that down. And really, you need to be in the market, right? Like, we're getting more demand out of Florida because people come and they see our facility and they see our product, right? And it's a more compelling case to be made when they can put their hands on it, right? And it's not sight unseen. So bringing production closer to those markets is going to be what makes sense at the end of the day.
Is it exactly the same system, same mixer, same pump, everything?
For the second
same silo?
Yeah. I don't think we get a silo with the second machine. We can order one. But yeah, everything else is exactly the same. We've done some modifications on our end. We'll do the same once we get the machine. And then anything beyond that will be an upgrade to bring the nozzle up to Vertigo's version 2. But
how long have you had this printer now?
So it was delivered in November of 22, so we're a little over 2 years.
Most times the warranty is only 1 year.
It's true in this case too.
But Volker's nice enough to pick up your calls still?
Yeah, those guys support. I mean, I don't know what his official policy is, but I mean, they've taken every call, right? They haven't been charging for phone support. At this point, if we need a component, it's not warranted anymore, right? But they've also been very good with sending stuff. So, if it's something small, we get it the same week usually, which is fantastic. And if it's bigger things, like we've had to order material from them because I like to have a backup of material that I know is tried and true. And that comes sea freight, but they're very responsive, and on their side, they get it out their door quickly, and then it's just a matter of waiting for shipping.
Do you keep backups of a lot of the reasonably priced parts?
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah, all the stuff that we know is a rare part, we try to have redundancy. Really, one of the major incentives for me to purchase a second machine is I'm projecting capacity demand, but moreover, it's because I want redundancy, right? I can't see you being a reputable, viable business on one machine. If the robot goes down, what does that mean for my business, right? It is an ABB robot, which means there's some
reliability,
availability on the market, right? Like it's available to be serviced.
Yeah.
But even so, like if we're saying it's going to take 3 weeks to a month for me to get back up and running, if I have a catastrophic issue with my robot or my pump,
I'll kill you.
Then that could be really damaging. So I'm looking at that machine purchase for redundancy and being able to say to clients, like, when you order from Printera, you're knowing that you're going to get your product on time, to the schedule that we set out at, and we've got reliable material and we've got a redundant system, and short of my whole building collapsing that I'm in, right, then nothing should be stopping me. So.
That kind of happened in Florida with it. You guys get wild hurricanes here.
We do. We are the first tenants in the building though, so it's up to the latest code.
Nice.
So we should be pretty solid here. And then the other beauty of the ultimate Printera expansion model is, you know, if we do have a print facility in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's DBA Printera, and something happens here or something happens there, we can have each other's back.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I actually have permission to talk about this. Like, this happened already with Citizen Robotic. So they had a job, they had some benches that they needed to get out the door, and they had a pump failure, and they called us up and they said, hey, can you guys help us out? And we were happy to do it. And that's the kind of spirit that, you know, I want to see fostered in the industry, right? Like,
Are they still printing?
I believe so.
Cool, good.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess that covers everything. It's been a really fun journey. I'm an open book on the entrepreneurial side of the journey, right? On the technical side of what we're doing. You know, I'll talk about projects. I'll talk about our experience. Anybody's welcome to contact me. I guess the plug at the end is, you know, we're on all the socials. You can get us online at our website, printera3d.com, and find our Startengine while we still got 20 days left. So if anyone listening wants to own a little piece of what we're doing here, I welcome and encourage it.
Not investment advice.
Not investment advice, right? On Jared's part, right? On my part, I'm not allowed to say it's real investment advice, but I welcome the entry into the community, right? Like, become part of the Printera community, and I'm an open book, a resource available to people.
Yeah, I'm actually one of them. I always try to get involved in any of the Startengine things I see if I can afford the minimum investment. So I'm proud to be involved a little bit.
We're happy to have you.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else we can cover, but I know I'll be back at some point, so we'll get a second episode in someday too.
Yeah, I hope to. You know, I know that we're kind of in the corridor that you somewhat frequent, so you know, maybe the next time you come, you'll see us in the second space. Maybe you'll see the second robot. I would like you to see a structure that we print. You know, we're starting here with the wall modules, but it'd be cool to see the final result of it one day.
I think you'll have with 3 house projects. One of them will be built in the next year or so, right?
Yeah, they all should be hitting this year. So
that's huge.
The most pressing one has been submitted for final permit approval. It got a rejection, nothing to do with 3D printing, but it had to do with the square footage of the house and how they were using the space. And that's already been rectified and resubmitted. So it should be any day. Like, my phone just buzzed and my phone, like, it could be that, right? So
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Housing, people say they want to do a housing project, and sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't, but you guys have done so much printing already. You have all this momentum. Even if the housing project doesn't work out, you're still a company, you're still printing stuff, so yes. There's like, it's good that you took those steps instead of just getting the printer saying, we're going to print a house, doing the house, the very first thing you do. Yeah. You'll have a lot more print experience. It'll be better quality print. People's first house usually looks like spaghetti.
Yeah.
Hopefully yours looks more like some of the stuff we see around here.
Yeah, and really, I mean, those 2 first wall modules are
looking good
pieces of that house. So, yeah.
Will they be left exposed?
Yes, they will.
That's beautiful.
Interior and exterior. Yep. Yep.
And
that's the affordability discussion, right? Like, I know you're saying it's nebulous at the moment, right? We don't really know where affordability comes into play, but
yeah, it's not really going to make housing more affordable. It will make that specific design, if
yes.
somebody needs that design built, more affordable than yes. it would be with an alternative method.
And I really believe that by having an elevated finish quality, if we present this and say, now you don't have to stucco and you don't have to drywall, that should help get it closer. Maybe, to your point, maybe it's not quite there yet, but that helps bridge the gap quite a lot when you're not, you know, stucco. I think the last time I saw it for a
so expensive
1,200 square foot house, you know, $4 or $5 a square foot.
What's
the interior, the drywall, right? I mean, you got a crew that's got to come through. Here, not on these modules today, but if we're actually doing one that's going to site, we'll make all the outlet cuts. You know, saving tradespeople time on site. Mm-hmm. You know, we can run conduit. We can do a lot of stuff here while we're printing that help consolidate the overall project on site.
What are the structural plans for these walls? Do they get a full backfill or is it partial?
They get fill cell. So this is St. Lucie County, so the requirement is every 6 feet there needs to be a fill cell, and then a bond beam around the top. So that's the method that this guy's using.
With rebar?
Rebar, exactly.
Everybody comments, no rebar. No, there's freaking rebar, guys.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah, there is rebar. Yeah, those pockets, right? That's you're dropping the rebar. It gets epoxied into the slab, so it's one piece, and then it backfill with concrete, and it should not move.
The best way to think about it in the current stage, in my opinion, is like you get a beautiful artisan wall with formwork, so that you don't have to build formwork or place formwork or remove formwork or store formwork.
Yep.
You just put the rebar in, backfill the column, and you're good to go.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. What we say to people, specifically engineers and architects now, is look at us as permanent decorative formwork, right? Don't consider us structural yet. In theory, the concrete is of a caliber that could be considered structural, but that's somewhere that you're now getting ahead of code, and we don't want to muddy the pie, right? Like we want to make sure that when an inspector comes in, it's a process that he understands and knows. It's the same as block, right? It's just bigger pieces, and it's filled and supported the same way. So
Bespoke, artisan, one of a kind.
yeah. So yeah.
It's been awesome watching your journey as you evolved. You got the printer, the pieces around just keep multiplying and multiplying.
Yeah.
The material quality is so much better than the first visits that I saw.
Thanks.
And I imagine it's only going to keep improving from there with more complex designs, bigger projects,
Yeah.
more automations.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited about it, and I hope maybe tomorrow they get you into the field to see some of the stuff we deploy. That would be kind of cool. So
Yeah, I'd like
we'll
to.
see. Yeah.
What would stop us from doing that?
The project that I'd like to take you to is a very high-end, almost celebrity property.
Okay.
So I have to be sensitive to whether or not they will be accommodating. I'll check in with them today. Worst case is I can take you to the Fast Street project, and that's an open. We've done gate columns there, supporting
Cool.
columns. So you'll see that at the very minimum. The celebrity property is really pretty impressive, though. It's right on the beach.
Yeah, we can be respectful about like not even getting the house in the image. We can just get the objects and the other side, like angle it so nothing that's viewable from the street is viewable from the video.
Yeah.
We'll see if that works out or not. But yeah, it's an awesome thing to see. And you guys are like the talk of the town. The neighboring companies come in and they check out what you're doing.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you remarked at our open door, so we're literally an open door policy today. But yeah, we love having people in. We love sharing the technology. We do a lot of stuff now with schools and kind of like youth associations, because they're the next generation of people that are going to be interested in construction. We've got videos on YouTube. Like the Pine School came in. We just did a bench with them, and it was so cool because the students broke up into teams of 3, and they actually designed benches. And then they came in and they presented, and we looked at what was printable, and ultimately it was a student design that got printed and delivered to the school.
Yeah, that's so cool.
But in addition to that, while they were here, we put the robot in manual, and we did an obstacle course where we strung a ball on the end of the robot and let them joystick it around, and prizes and understand the technology. And so yeah, we're trying to like stimulate the excitement and encouragement in what we're doing, and it's pretty easy to do because people find it interesting and appealing and cool. So.
Which is crazy because it's construction, so it's not necessarily easy to get young people excited about construction, but once you got the printer involved, all of a sudden they're flocking to it.
Yeah, and I think there's also an argument to be made for if you want to be in the construction business, like in the trades, your quality of working environment here in a warehouse with air conditioning, and you see Justin still in the background, right? Like it's not burdensome work, right? So if you have the choice between that and you're out sweating in the sun, trying to move blocks around, I think this is a compelling case to be made.
I wonder if you should have a mic in here so that the AI can learn the little subtle things that Justin knows to listen to.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
AI audio.
Yeah.
Would you do more school events? Like if there's somebody listening and they want to have their school out here?
Absolutely. Yep. Happy to have students out. We've done Votech schools, we've done private schools. I mean, it's no sweat off our back to have students come in and observe. We try to line it up with while we're already doing production, so it's no imposition on our part. So yeah, reach out if you're interested.
They'll be future employees someday.
Yeah, that's the idea. And we always get interest. Like when students are leaving, they're like, "Hey, you're not doing internships, right?" So we haven't been able to capitalize on it yet because of where we're at in our growth curve. But when it's time, I mean, it's cool to know that there's a pipeline of interested people.
Maybe there's some school where they can do like a project printing stuff for the school, and then they do an internship offered to the people, so they're printing their own stuff for their own school.
Could be. Yeah, we're open to it.
That stuff is so cool. I never really got any like hands-on experience with anything in like middle school, high school. I would have loved that so much, I think. Or maybe not, I don't know, but it's a great thing you can offer it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess one more on that topic. So a really good example is IRSC, so it's Indian River State College. They're just like a little bit north of us here. They were the recipients of Mackenzie, formerly Mackenzie Bezos, right? So she, with her fortune, right, she decided to be very philanthropic, and she made crazy donations to a lot of schools. And so they got a $20 million grant from her.
Wow.
And they created the Center for Advanced Manufacturing.
Cool.
So they've got robotic arms, they've got a welding program, they've got like circuitry, right? So I went and I did a tour, and they're like kind of our local college, right? And so they're looking at what we're doing and saying, hey, how can we train a workforce that's going to be ideal to what we need? Mm-hmm. And then on our end, we're saying, how can we support the curriculum of the school? And it's partnerships like that I think are going to go a long way to, keeping people interested, but also making sure that, they come into this and they understand what they're getting into, and how it affects, whether it's running the pump in the robot or whether that's designing for how these pieces go together.
You're an early pioneer in building out the ecosystem so that 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now it'll be even bigger, thriving.
So, it looks like we're coming up on completion of the second module. It's got another foot and change to go, but
All right, let's go film some TikToks.
All right, let's do it. Jarrett?
Good talking to you.
Finally good to do this.
Yeah, great podcast. First time. First of many.